Hi friends, welcome back to our e-teaching channel. I'm back with the stories of Immortals of Meluha by Amish Tripathi, the first part of Shiva trilogy. So till now we have completed 12 chapters. So today we are entering in chapter 13. So before that, a quick recap of chapter 12. From the chapter we came to know that the Nagas were not so bad. The Naga helped a woman from the crocodile. So risking his life, he helped, the Naga helped the woman. So let's start our new chapter, chapter 13. So the chapter 13 is Blessings of Impure. Kotwar was in all its glory to receive the Nilkant. Torches had been lit across the fort perimeter as if it was Diwali. Red and blue pennants embellished with the Suryavanshi sun had been hung down the fort walls. In a rare breach of protocol, the governor had come outside the city to personally receive the Nilkant. After the formal exhibition of the Nilkant for the Kotwar elite at the local court, a public function had been organized the following day. 65,000 people, practically the entire population of Kotwar, had converged for the event. Considering the vast number of attendees, the event had been organized outside the city platform to ensure that every person could be accommodated. A speech by Shiva convinced that Kotalwarans that Meluha's days of trouble were soon to end. The remarkable effect Shiva seemed to have on the people was a revelation to him. Though he was careful with his words, telling them that he would do all he could do to support the people of Meluha, the public made their own interpretations. The cursed Chandravanshis will finally be destroyed, said one man. We don't have to worry about anything now. The Nilkant will take care of everything, said a woman. Seated with Brihaspati and Sati on the speaker's platform, Parvateshwar was deeply unhappy at the public's reaction. Turning to the chief scientist, he said, Our entire society is based on laws, and we are not supposed to blindly follow anyone. We are expected to solve our problems ourselves and not hope for miracles from a solitary man. What has this man done to deserve such blind faith? Parvateshwar, said Brihaspati, politely, for he greatly respected him. I think Shiva is a good man. I think he cares enough to want to do something. And are not good intentions the first step towards any good deed? Parvateshwar did not completely agree. Never a believer in the legend of Nilkant, the general thought that every man or woman had to earn his station in life with training and preparation, not just get it on a silver platter because of a blue throat. Yes, that may be true, but intentions are not enough. They have to be backed up by ability as well. Here we are putting an untrained man on a pedestal and acting as though he is our savior. For all we know, he might lead us to complete disaster. We are acting on faith, not logic or laws, or even experience. Sometimes one needs a little bit of faith when faced with a difficult situation. Rational answers don't always work. We also need a miracle. You're talking about miracles? A scientist? You can have scientific miracles too, Parvateshwar, smiled Brihaspati. Parvateshwar was distracted by the sight of Shiva stepping off the platform. As he came down, there was a surge of people wanting to touch his hands. The soldiers, led by Nandi and Veerabhadra, were holding them back. There was one blind man amongst them who looked like He might be injured in the melee. Nandi, let that man through, said Shiva. Nandi and Veerbhadra lowered the rope to let him in. Another man shouted, I am his son. He needs me to guide him. Let him in as well, said Shiva. The son rushed in and held his father's hand. The blind man, who seemed lost without his son's hand, smiled warmly as he recognized the familiar touch. He was led close to Shiva, and the son said, Father, the Nilkant is right in front of you. Can you sense his presence? Copious tears flowed from the blind man's eyes. Without thinking, he bent down to try and touch Shiva's feet. His son cried out in shock as he pulled the man back sharply. Father, scolded the son. Shiva was stunned by the harshness in the son's tone compared to the loving manner in which he had spoken so far. What happened? I'm sorry, my lord, apologized the son. He did not mean to. He just lost control due to your presence. I'm sorry, my lord, said the blind man, his tears flowing stronger. Sorry for what? He's a Vikarma, my lord, said his son. Ever since disease blinded him 20 years ago, he should not have tried to touch you. Sati, who was now standing near Shiva, had heard the entire conversation. She felt sympathy for the blind man. She knew that torment of having even your touch considered impure. But what he had tried to do was illegal. I'm sorry, my lord, continued the blind man, but please don't let your anger with me stop you from protecting our country. It is the greatest land that Paramatma created. Save it from the evil Chandravanshis. Save us, my lord. The blind man continued to cry, folding his hands in a penitent namaste. Shiva was shaken by the dignity of the blind man. He still loves a country that treats him so unfairly. Why? Even worse, he does not even appear to think he is being treated unfairly. Tears welled up in Shiva's eyes as he realized that he was looking at a man whom fate had been very unkind to. I'll stop this nonsense. Shiva stepped forward and bent down. The flabbergasted son trembled in disbelief as he saw the Nilkant touch the feet of his Vikarma father. The blind man was at sea for a moment. When he did understand what the Nilkant had done, his hand shot up to cover his mouth in shock. Shiva rose and stood in front of the blind man. Bless me, sir, so that I find the strength to fight for a man as patriotic as you. The blind man stood dumbstruck. His tears dried up in his bewilderment. He was about to collapse when Shiva took a quick step forward to hold him, lest he fall to the ground. The blind man found the strength to say, Vijayi Bhava, may you be victorious. The son caught hold of his father's limp body as Shiva released him. The entire crowd was stunned into silence by what the Nilkant had done. Forget the gravity of touching a Vikarma. The Nilkant had just asked to be blessed by one. Shiva turned to see Parvateshwar enraged face. Shiva had broken the law, broken it brazenly and in public. Next to him stood Sati, her face, her eyes, her entire demeanor expressionless. What the hell is she thinking? Brahaspati and Sati entered Shiva's chambers as soon as he was alone. Shiva smiled at seeing his two favorite people in the world disappeared on hearing Sati's voice. You must get a Shuddhikaran done. He looked at her and answered simply, No. No? What do you mean, no? I mean, no, nahi, nakho, said Shiva, adding the words for no in the Kashmiri and the Kotalwar dialect for good measure. Shiva, said Brahaspati, keeping his composure. This is no laughing matter. I agree with Sati. The governor too was worried about your safety and has arranged for a pandit. He waits outside as we speak. Get the ceremony done now. But I just said I don't want to. Shiva, said Sati, reverting to her usual tone. I respect you immensely, your valor, your intelligence, your talent, but you are not above the law. You have touched a vikarma. You have to get a shuddhikaran. That is the law. Well, if the law says that my touching that poor blind man is illegal, then the law is wrong. Sati was stunned into silence by Shiva's attitude. Shiva, listen to me, argued Brihaspati. Not doing a shuddhikaran can be harmful to you. You are meant for bigger things. You are important to the future of India. Don't put your own person at risk out of obstinacy. It's not obstinacy. You tell me honestly, how can it harm me if I happen to touch a wronged man who, I might add, still loves his country despite the way he has been ostracized and ill-treated? He may be a good man, Shiva, but the sins of his previous birth will contaminate your fate, said Brihaspati. Then let them. If the weight on that man's shoulders lessens, I will feel blessed. What are you saying, Shiva? Asked Sati. Why should you carry the punishment of someone else's sins? Firstly, I don't believe in the nonsense that he was punished for the sins of his previous birth. He was just infected by a disease, plain and simple. Secondly, if it is my choice to carry the weight of someone else's so-called sins, why should it matter to anyone? It matters because we care about you, cried Brihaspati. Come on, Sati, said Shiva. Don't tell me you believe in this rubbish. It is not rubbish. Look, don't you want me to fight for you? Stop this unfairness that your society has subjected you to. Is that what this is about? Me? Asked Sati, outraged. No, retorted Shiva immediately, then added, Actually, yes, this is also about you. It is about the vikarma and the unfairness that they have to face. I want to save them from leading the life of an outcast. I don't need your protection. I cannot be saved, shouted Sati, before storming out of the room. Shiva glared at her retreating form in irritation. What the hell is it with this woman? She is right, Shiva, advised Brihaspati. Don't go there. You agree with her on this vikarma business? Answer with your heart, Brihaspati. Don't you think it is unfair? I was not talking about that. I was talking about Sati. Shiva continued to glare at Brihaspati defiantly. Everything in his mind, body and soul told him that he should pursue Sati. That his life would be meaningless without her. That his soul's existence would be incomplete without her. Don't go there, my friend, reiterated Brihaspati. The caravan left the river city of Kotwar on a royal barge led and followed by two large boats of equal size and grandeur as the royal vessel. Typical of the Meluhan security system, the additional boats were to confuse any attacker about which boat the royal family may be on. The entire royal party was in the second boat. Each of the three large boats was manned by a brigade of soldiers. Additionally, there were 5 small and quick cutter boats on both sides of the royal convoy, keeping pace and protecting the sides in case of an ambush. When the monsoon is not active, my lord, said Ayurvati, the rivers are the best way to travel. Though we have good roads connecting all major cities, it cannot match the rivers in terms of speed and safety. Shiva smiled at Ayurvati politely. He was not in the frame of mind for much conversation. Sati had not spoken to Shiva since that fateful day at Kotwar when he had refused to undergo a Shuddhikaran. The royal barge stopped at many cities along the river. The routine seemed much the same. Extreme exuberance would manifest itself in each city on the arrival of the Nilkant. It was a kind of reaction unnatural in Meluha. But then a Nilkant did not graze the land every day. Why? Asked Shiva of Brihaspati. After many days of keeping quiet about the disquiet in his troubled heart. Why? What? You know what I am talking about, Brihaspati, said Shiva, narrowing his eyes in irritation. She genuinely believes that she deserves to be a Vikarma, answered Brihaspati with a sad smile. Why? Perhaps because of the manner in which she became a Vikarma. How did it happen? It happened during her earlier marriage. What? Sati was married? Yes, that was around 90 years back. It was a political marriage with one of the noble families of the empire. Her husband's name was Chandandvaj. She got pregnant and went to the Maika to deliver the child. It was the monsoon season. Unfortunately, the child was stillborn. Oh my God, said Shiva, empathizing with the pain Sati must have felt. But it was worse. On the same day, her husband, who had gone to the Narmada to pray for the safe birth of her child, accidentally drowned. On that cursed day, her life was destroyed. Shiva stared at Brihaspati, too stunned to react. She became a widow and was declared a Vikarma the same day. But how can the husband's death be considered her fault? Argued Shiva. That is completely ridiculous. She was not declared a Vikarma because of her husband's death. It was because she gave birth to a stillborn child. But that could be due to any reason. Maybe there was a mistake that the local doctors committed. That does not happen in Meluha, Shiva, said Brihaspati calmly. Having a stillborn child is probably one of the worst ways for a woman to become a Vikarma. Only giving birth to a Naga child would be considered worse. Thank God that did not happen, because then she would have been completely ostracized from the society. This has to be changed. The concept of Vikarma is unfair. Brihaspati looked at his friend intensely. You might save the Vikarma, Shiva, but how do you save a woman who does not want to be saved? She genuinely believes she deserves this punishment. Why? I'm sure she is not the first Meluhan woman to give birth to a stillborn. There must have been others before her. There will be many more after her. She was the first royal woman to give birth to a stillborn. Her fate has been a source of embarrassment to the emperor. It raises questions about his ancestry. How would it raise questions about his lineage? Sati is not his birth daughter. She would also have come from Maika, right? No, my friend. That law was relaxed for families of nobility around 250 years back. Apparently, in the national interest, noble families were allowed to keep their birth children. Some laws can be amended provided 90% of the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas above a particular chosen tribe and job status vote for the change. There have been rare instances of such unanimity. This was one of them. Only one man opposed this change. Who is it? Lord Satyadhvaj, the grandfather of Parvateshwar. The family had vowed not to have any birth children since this law was passed. Parvateshwar honors that promise to this day. But if the birth law could be changed, said Shiva, working things out, why could not the law of Vikarma? because there are not enough noble families affected by that law. That is a harsh truth. But all this goes completely against Lord Ram's teaching. Lord Ram's teaching also say that the concept of the Vikarma is correct. Don't you want to question that? Shiva glanced at Brihaspati silently before looking out over the river. There is nothing wrong with questioning Lord Ram's laws, my friend, said Brihaspati. There were many times when he himself stood down because of someone else's rationale. The question is that what are your motives for wanting to change the law? Is it because you genuinely think the law itself is unfair, or is it because you are attracted to Sati and you want to remove an inconvenient law which stands in your path? Sorry. An inconvenient law which stands in your path. I genuinely think the Vikarma law is unfair. I felt that from the moment I found out about it, even before I knew Sati was a Vikarma. But Sati does not think the law is unfair. But she is a good woman. She does not deserve to be treated this way. She is not just a good woman. She is one of the finest I have ever met. She is beautiful, honest, straightforward, brave, and intelligent. Everything a man could want in a woman. But you are not just any man. You are the Nilkant. Shiva turned around and rested his hands on the craft's railing. He looked into the distance at the dense forest along the river banks as their boat glided across the water. The soothing evening breeze fanned Shiva's long locks. I have told you before, my friend, said Brihaspati. Because of that unfortunate blue throat, every decision you take has many ramifications. You have to think many times before you act. It was late in the night. The royal convoy had just set sail from the city of Satgangar on the Indus. The emotions at Satgangar had erupted in the low, predictable routine of exuberance at the sight of the savior of their civilization had finally arrived. Their savior, however, was in his own private hell. Sati had maintained her distance from Shiva for the last few weeks. He was torn, experiencing pain and dismay at depths he did not think fathomable. The convoy's next stop was the famous city of Mohenjo-daro, or the platform of Mohan. The city on the mighty Indus was dedicated to a great philosopher priest called Lord Mohan, who lived in this region many thousands of years ago. Once he had met with the people of Mohenjo-daro, Shiva expressed a desire to visit the temple of Lord Mohan. This temple stood outside the main city platform, further down the Indus. The governor of Mohenjo-daro had offered to take the Lord Nilkant there in a grand procession. Shiva, however, insisted on going alone. He felt drawn to the temple. He felt that it would have some solution for his troubled heart. The temple itself was simple, much like Lord Mohan himself. A small, nondescript structure announced itself as the birthplace of the sage. The only sign of the temple's significance was a massive gates in the four cardinal directions of the compound. As instructed by Shiva, Nandi, and Veerabhadra, along with their platoon, waited outside. Shiva, with his comforting cravat bag around his neck, walked up the steps, feeling tranquil after a long time. He rang the bell at the entrance and sat down against a pillar with his eyes shut in quiet contemplation. Suddenly, an oddly familiar voice asked, "How are you, my friend?" Do subscribe to our e-teaching channel for further interesting videos and audio books. Give us a thumbs up if you like our videos, and share with your friends and family. Comment us to improve our work better. Thank you.